Good morning from a brisk New Jersey October fall morning. We're here at NJMP for test day. There's Max.
Hey.
Yep, we got the Royale out here shaking it down after the repairs made. Yep, and Max is over here in Sam Myers Zinc Z10. This will be the first test after repairing this left rear. So we've got about 40 minutes until our first test session. So we're just warming up here, heat soak the motor, and keep it revved up to about 2 grand until we get about 100 degrees in the water temp. And then rev it up every once in a while. This keeps the water circulating and gets the head nice and heat soaked. One final check before we go out on track, make sure everything's tight, and yeah, we'll see how it goes on track, see if any adjustments need to be made, see how it feels, yeah, and then go from there. The first session we went out and I had a wicked vibration in the left rear, and it ended up just being the CV axle not being tightened down properly. So as you can see, there's 6 bolts that go all the way around to secure the axle to the upright, and they were all a little loose, and luckily this axle didn't come disconnected from the upright, or else it could have caused a myriad of damage and could have ended our weekend for something as dumb as loose bolts. So made sure everything was tight and hunkered down in the left rear and the right rear. Just make sure there was no oversights there. In the second session, I was still having a bit of a vibration, but it wasn't as bad as the first session. Came in, I mean, all in all, it went pretty well, but there was still something loose. So we came in, checked the left rear, Checked that the hub was tight. As you can see, it's really tight now, but there was a little bit of play in it when we came in and we're shaking things down. So what we did was we tightened the axle bolt. So you can see the nut is on this side and the bolt is hidden by the axle, but the bolt is inside here. So we had to disconnect the axle from the upright, get a socket in there, get a socket with a breaker bar on this side, and tighten down that axle bolt. And we went out again for session 3, but unfortunately session 3 was very short-lived. We didn't even make it half a lap on the out lap. Was exiting turn 5 and absolutely lost all drive. I mean, it still had engine power, but it just felt like it had no gears. So my initial thought was that we lost an input shaft, because that happened to us in the past. And if that was the case, it was going to end our weekend, because it's a custom part. It's not something you really keep a spare for, and you'd have to take apart the whole rear end essentially just to get inside to replace the input shaft. So I was a little heartbroken. I was watching from the sidelines thinking that the input shaft was broken, and my chances of racing against Max, my brother in the yellow zinc, were pretty much over on the test day. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Hope it's something fixed.
Yeah. But luckily we came in, we did some diagnosing, and it was the CV joint again. But this time it was the cage assembly inside. So that was something that we had to replace. It was one of the parts that was damaged in the crash at Watkins Glen. And the cage in the replacement part had a hairline fracture in it, which just caused the axle to spin freely. And yeah, gave us no drive. But luckily we had another spare part in the trailer. So we thrashed to get that on there. My dad, Sam Iyer, and my brother, we all teamed together, and pretty quickly, in about 25-30 minutes, we got the new CV joint on that axle, and we were ready to go for session number 4, the final session of the test day. And that went pretty swimmingly. No real issues. Max and I had some pretty good little battles in the test day, just trying to figure out where we could pass on the new repaved circuit. And turn 1 was a little reconfigured, so we were both trying to figure out what was the best line, what's our braking points, what's the new turning points, because it's almost a new track with the repave and the widening of turn 1. So a lot of things to figure out, and yeah, we're ready for Saturday, qualifying and 2 races. Yep, so Saturday morning came. It was a really cold October morning in New Jersey, and we're the second group out, so it was around 8:30 when we went out for our qualifying. Tires are ice cold. You got to be really careful in the first few laps and let your tires get a decent bit of heat in them before you can really go for it. Unfortunately, on the out lap, one of our fellow competitors got caught out, ended up spinning and tagging the wall, which caused about a 10-minute black flag period. So we're just sitting in the pits while Evie recovered the car and made sure that the course was clear. And we went out with 5 minutes to put in a lap. So we really only had about 3 hot laps to get out there, get a little bit of temperature in the tires, and go for at least one good lap. And Max and I went out, we're pretty close to each other, passing each other back and forth on the first few laps. And we were only separated by 0.4 of a second. So I ended up getting pole in all the Formula Fords, and we're going to start first for the first heat race. Is it 6-1? First heat race was a lot of fun. Max and I were battling each other for a good 6 laps, but unfortunately Max had a little bit of an electrical fire. One of his power cables going to his starter ended up grounding out on the frame and caused the brush fire because it's been so dry in New Jersey. It hasn't rained in multiple weeks. So as soon as he pulled off, the grass caught on fire. And the only real damage that the car incurred was a melted throttle cable. So that caused a red flag and ended our race about 7 laps short. So thanks, Max, for handing me the win on that one. But in all seriousness, glad he's okay. Heard he ran a pretty good distance to go get a fire bottle and put out the fire. And yeah, the time in between heat race 1 and heat race 2 was spent thrashing on Max's car, trying to sort out the issues caused by the electrical fire. Ended up shorting out his battery and causing an acid leak. and a couple other minor things. And we're trying to source a throttle cable throughout the paddock. Couldn't really find one that fit right, but luckily Dad's got a Zinc over there, same model as Sam's, and it had a throttle cable in it. So Dad came back and took out his throttle cable, brought it back to the track, and we were thrashing, trying to get the throttle cable in time for Heat Race 2, which they were able to do, but it was binding on something in the frame, and Max wasn't able to make it out for Heat Race 2. Heat Race 2 was pretty uneventful. Heat Race 1 was a points-paying race, so Heat Race 2 didn't mean as much, but yeah, like I said, pretty uneventful, not a lot of passing. Just doing some hot laps, doing really consistent laps, trying to figure out the track and figure out, like I said, from the test session, the optimal brake points and turn-in points for turn 1, seeing how deep I could go on the brakes, how much speed I could carry through. Yeah, it just ended up being a solid test session for me. And on Sunday, we had our feature race. So we were the 3rd race overall. No, actually, we were the 5th race because 2 races from Saturday had to get carried over to Sunday morning. So we were the 5th race of the day. And Max took his early morning hardship. And just to make sure that the throttle cable is functioning properly and make sure it was up to the task for the 20-lap feature. And yeah, so started the feature race. Eddie McNaughton got by me into turn 1, and I saw in my mirrors that Max kind of got jumped by the guys behind. They had a little bit of a better start, and maybe it was something to do with the throttle cable where Max didn't get as good of a start. So I just tucked behind Eddie McNaughton in a Swift just to try to save some fuel and save my tires while also waiting for Max to catch up like I knew he would. And by lap, I want to say 5 or 6, Max ended up getting by me, and the race was on from there. So the plan was to try to draft each other and get by Eddie and then try to break away and have a good race. But unfortunately, Eddie ended up having a big spin going into turn 1. Max and I both had to take avoiding action. Max ended up going wide driver's left to try to avoid the spinning car and had to come to almost a dead stop off the track where I was able to keep it on the track. And that kind of just broke us up from there. Tried waiting for Max, but he was too far behind. and caution ended up coming out for a broken down Formula 600 car. So it was a long pace car period. Pace car ended up picking the wrong leader coming out of the pits. So it took a while for them to figure out the order and get us where we need to be. It was about 5 laps under the pace car, unfortunately. But yeah, they scooped up that Formula 600 car, got the order sorted, and on the restart, it had to only be like 5 laps. That's what I figured in my head until the checker flag. So I went out as fast as I could in an attempt to get a track record because I knew it was on the table. I put on these used tires. They're scrubbed, but they're relatively new. I think they only had 2 heat cycles on them from our race Labor Day weekend at Summit Point. So yeah, just put my head down, try to get as much heat in the tires as I could in the first couple laps, and then string together some really quick laps. The last lap ended up being the fastest lap. I got the new Club Ford track record with a 123.176, but I know there's at least a few tenths on the table. Took a couple corners a little optimistically, made some sloppy mistakes, as you'll see in my onboard video. And we're having some minor fuel pickup issues through the fast right-handers. So something we have to diagnose. Might be something to do with the fuel lines coming out of the fuel cell. We don't know yet. We still have to take some things apart and try to sort that out. It might be that the engine bay is getting a little too hot and affecting the air-fuel ratio. A couple things to figure out there. So we're back in the shop after a successful weekend at NJMP at the Thunderbolt circuit for the Mars Championship finale. All in all, it went really well. We secured the Mars Championship in Club Ford, which is what these cars run. They're a Formula Ford, but they're vintage Formula Ford. So we run a different class because we run the bias ply tires where the Formula Fords now run the radials. And because our older cars have a aerodynamic disadvantage, we run in a different class, but we're still relatively competitive compared to the more modern cars. But we thought this was going to be the end of our season, but I got a call from our good friend Carl. His dad started the Mars Championship Series, and is really the reason why we go out here and race for a championship. And he won a free entry to the Turkey Bowl, which is the vintage race at Summit Point in November. And he was gracious enough to re-gift that to me. So our next race will be the weekend before Thanksgiving at Summit Point. It's going to be chilly, but it'll be fun. It'll be good for the motor. We'll be making good horsepower. and it should be good for lap times. I mean, the tires will get warm, but they won't get too hot. So looking forward to that. I thought our season was done, but we got one more. So looking forward to it. Maybe we can sort out these fuel pickup issues. Yeah, we'll see. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors that made this successful season possible. Starting with Dominion Title Services, based out of Bridgeton, New Jersey. Turf Trade, based out of Mullica Hill. They have a location in Mullica Hill and Delaware as well. Those guys do a lot of really good work with golf courses, football fields, you name it. If it's got turf, these guys do great work. Cindy Parker from Exit Realty, if you're looking for a house in South Jersey, that's the person you got to talk to right there. Sisters Fun to Find Jewelry, based out of Mullica Hill. They do a lot of really cool antique jewelry as well as any custom jewelry. We have DCM Architecture and Engineering. Lisa, good friend Rand, that helps us with tires. We got Anzi Suspension, based out of Florida, but they do suspension on any car you have, formula car, sedan. If you race it, he can tune your suspension for you, no problem. And RAC Engines, based out of Maryland. That's who provides our motors for us, Clay, and that's his number there. So if you ever need a racing motor, you know who to call. All right, so thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like this video. And yeah, consider getting a membership to this channel if you want to support this type of content. Do a lot of onboards, and over the winter I'm going to be doing a deep dive into how it's possible to go racing, especially a formula car, on a really tight budget and make it work. I mean, I'm only 23 years old, and yeah, making it work by myself, a little bit of help from my dad. But yeah, stay tuned for the Turkey Bowl and some more content coming out over the winter. Appreciate you watching. Bye.